Welcome back to your weekly review, and we're going to be going over week 3, and it was an exciting and stunning week for sure. We're going to start out with the Texans-Vikings game. That was definitely one that was a stunner. The Texans mightily struggled, and it does start out with the offensive line. Now, we do have to understand that it is a young offensive line, but some of the things that they were doing, a la false starts, even holdings, certain holding calls that they had, very inexplicable. And D'Amico Ryans even addressed it immediately at their practice presser. And he said that they definitely were going to try and make sure that doesn't happen again. Because like 3 of the first 6 Texans drives were killed just from false starts. Like flags, anything. And that is not sustainable. Especially in this NFL where everything is based on how well your offense is going to do in the crucial moments and perform. If you're committing flags when it's on the line, all it's gonna do ultimately is take back a huge play that your team maybe had made. And I mean, we've seen that with a few teams. I know as a Steelers fan, I've seen it a lot where we could have had more offensive scoring or explosiveness, but it doesn't seem that way if you just look at the box score because of the flags that occurred throughout the game. The line has struggled in the run game, particularly. They've when on designed runs in the last game, in which Cam Akers was playing, their third running back. He was contacted 8 out of 11 times, strictly on design runs. Now, I don't believe that's actually all Cam Akers, but the idea is that they were contacted before they could even get past the line of scrimmage, so that's on the line. I don't know much running backs that can run behind that in general. And the funny thing was, yes, I did underscore the fact that it's a younger O-line, but Laramie Tunsil, their all-pro tackle, who has shown bursts of consistency throughout the years, was one of the biggest problems and biggest issues for the offensive line, and I just don't know if many running backs can even run behind that, and that kind of just, and I don't know if this has been a problem the entire season, but I just noticed it in this game particularly. So if this has been a problem the entire season, which it may have been considering they're young and they make the same mistakes, that means that just gives me more respect for Joe Mixon and what he was able to accomplish in the first 2 weeks. And it's clear that his loss is hurting them. And I don't think they had much of a run game to begin with. And then when they got rid of the run, when the Vikings got rid of the run game, Brian FLORES, which we'll talk about in a second here, was able to shut them down in the pass game. So Joe Mixon obviously provides that huge burst that this offense needs, and it just shows. Another thing, and like this is a third thing that I noticed that they definitely struggle with, and this is courtesy of FLORES, they struggle with a lot of stunts. So I don't know if that tends to be a younger O-line issue, because you coming out of college, they don't do it as much. It's not really like a lot of the defensive coordinators in college don't utilize stunts as much because again their linemen aren't that as athletic as all the. But if you're in the NFL, all your D-line are going to be athletic. So you can kind of get away with a bunch of stunts because they can cross and make the right moves on the outside, and they actually have more tools on their belt. Whereas college, it's a lot of the guys use more just power, unless you have your more elite rushers in college that actually have a tool bag. Like Latu coming out of college actually had a really good set of pass rushing moves, but a lot of college guys don't. So that's why a line they don't have as much reps as a veteran will have, or near as much as reps as a veteran will have in the stunt game. And it's fitting that Brian Flores, who is a master at this, he understands how to align his D line, when to stunt, where to place his the different ends, on which sides based on what they're gonna succeed more on, based on the tackle that they're going up against, and it's all according to his ability to blitz. Like that's just now he has kind of dialed it back this year with his blitzing. It's more now just rushing the passer with 4 versus the regular 5 that he was used to a lot last year in 2023. And that is due in fact that a lot of teams, and this is kind of like, again, the NFL is a copycat league, so this is due in fact that they want to have, or every team wants to have 2 safeties high to shut down the home run plays. So that being said, that's why a lot of teams, again, that's why Shanahan, McVay, McConnell, like all these guys who run this West Coast offense ensure that their run game is there before they try and attack the middle of the field, because if they don't have that run game, then these teams can kind of just lean on the cover 2 and cover 4, cover 2, cover 6, whatever, and keep the 2 safeties in the back, keep the middle of the field closed in the middle, whereas cover 2, the middle is open in the very deep. But obviously that doesn't matter because 2 safeties can cover the field better than 1 safety, unless you have and instead of obviously having the 1 safety in the box and you have the 1 back and playing man, you have that cover 2. And the whole way of getting around cover 2 is just run the ball. Just run the ball. And so if you have that run game, you can just get around it. But again, the Texans couldn't create that run game. So then Brian Flores. So what did Brian Flores do at the beginning? He blitzed a lot. He did the things that he was used to in 2023. But then immediately, as soon as that run game was destroyed and detrimented, they could just start only rushing 4 and then keep the cover 2, and CJ Stroud, when he needed to, he was trying to make plays and get the ball down the field because they needed to. They were down 21-3, I believe, at one point. I could be wrong, but they were down 21-0 at one point. So obviously a young quarterback, when they're down 21-0, is going to feel pressure and feel like they have to do too much. We obviously seen that in Caleb. So Brian Flores understood, and CJ Stroud even admitted at the end of the game that he was seeing things that he just wasn't used to, and like the commentators were saying, this is his first time in US Bank Stadium, and this is no quiet stadium. Vikings fans are serious about getting loud. So obviously this was one of the few times where he's actually had to rely on the silent counts and cadence, and there was clearly issues, and you could see it. And again, that's going to come from a young O-line. So I'm going to play this clip of what CJ Stroud had to say about the Brian Flores defense that he was facing.
But I was making the right reads all day. I feel like I played well, other than the turnovers, especially the one at the end. But I was seeing it well, trying to just stay in the pocket and deliver as best I could. But they had some coverages and some pressures that they did at a very, very high level. So kudos to those guys.
So clearly, C.J. Stroud has a lot of respect for what Brian Flores is accomplishing over there. This Vikings defense, they don't have the craziest team on paper, but they're accomplishing a lot because Flores is putting a masterclass on defense and to work. And we can all sit here and say that he does deserve, and I believe he is deserving of a head coaching job. Now the thing is obviously that he has a current filed lawsuit against the NFL right now, and obviously that thing came out with Tua. So I don't know if he's gonna get a head coaching job because of some stuff, some off the field stuff or whatever. But I definitely believe he deserves it with what he's doing, scheming up on the field. It's quite spectacular. So yeah. Now let's talk about the Vikings offense. Darnold, just continuing his excellence on the team. But we do have to question if this. I mean, the defense is clearly legit. Like, I don't think you're gonna sit here and say, well, maybe they're a flawed defense. Whatever. Some team will put 40. No, I don't think so. I don't think it's gonna be like where the Cowboys we saw in Week 1 against the Browns, and we're like, oh, this defense is still legit. And then the Saints put almost dang near 50 on them, scoring on 8 straight drives. Like, it's not like we're gonna see that. But with the offense, it is questionable if it's actually going to stay this way and remain, an excellent offense, because that's truly what it's been. I mean, Darnold's been playing at an MVP level. I mean, you can't deny that. I know, he's not going to be in the odds. People are going to say he's not deserving of an MVP or whatever, because it is. I mean, at the end of the day, we like to say MVP is based on one season. But, a lot of it is narrative driven. So, and when you have a narrative driven award, it's going to be based on more of a holistic view versus like just a seasonal stat view like that. So that Darnold obviously is not going to like Darnold would be in the running for comeback play of the year, because that's the narrative is that he came back from something insane, but the narrative that that he used to, the narrative of what kind of quarterback he is, and he might not be getting exposed to, or we might not be getting exposed to what he used to be. Kevin McConnell might be hiding his weak points. We don't know yet, and that's why I'm asking the question if he's legit or not, because we do not understand whether this Darnold that we're seeing is what was actually supposed to come of him if he was in the right situation, or if this is just he's in the right situation and he's just a beneficiary of it, of Kevin O'Connell, who should be in the Coach of the Year running, right? We don't know. I mean, Kyle Shanahan had, high praise for him, and clearly, Kevin O'Connell being great friends with Kyle, they got somewhat same viewpoints. So obviously, if he was going to work in 49ers system, he's probably going to work in Minnesota. So, I mean, he's first in almost every red zone metric right now. That's insane. Like if he's in the red zone, he's scoring. And that's not easy to do anywhere. So, for him to just really execute in the most crucial part of the field against, some actual good red zone defenses in the 49ers and the and the Texans is actually it's amazing to see, and I just don't know how much to accredit. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell deserves a lot of credit, but how much do we credit to Darnold here? I mean, he's also fourth in pass rating in the league. I mean, Andy Dalton's third, so I don't know if that's saying much, but Andy Dalton's played one game, he's played already 3, and he's looked good in every game. So this is clearly the best start for a Vikings quarterback in the first 3 games ever. So that speaks for itself. And whether he continues this or goes on a what the media likes to call a pumpkin run, we will have to see if that actually is where he ends up. But a lot of people, including I'll take it. I was like, I think Darnold's in the right situation where he can. And I didn't like the preseason stuff. That really irritated me because, like, I get in this bad habit of seeing things in the preseason and thinking, oh, this is how it's gonna end up, whatever, and then it just never ends up like that. So and the thing is, I always know that the preseason just never means anything, and yet because I've been so many months without football, I'm just like, man, I don't know what to know anymore. So I'm just gonna see what I see with my eyes and go from there, and no other factors matter, right? So we just have to completely undermine what the preseason is, and when season comes is when we actually start evaluating what's going on. Clearly, Darnold is going to work in this type of system. I think that there's no doubting that, but it's going to be a question of whether he can win you those big games versus is he just going to run a system and that system works up until where a defensive coordinator cracks the code and just shuts him down, or is he going to be able to improvise and make crucial plays when things aren't going your way? Because I can't remember if I think they've played with a lead the entire. I can't remember. Yeah, I mean, they had the lead against the Texans. They started out scoring against the 49ers, and I'm pretty sure they scored first in the Giants game. But same thing with the 49ers last year. When they played with the lead, they were dominating, but when they didn't play with the lead, Brock Purdy was struggling. So again, and with these younger quarterbacks, it's typically what happens. They feel pressured. They feel like they have to do too much. And then it turns out they didn't need to do too much. And now because they're trying to do too much, they throw an interception. They get sacked. They fumble the ball. That's just what we have to wait to see. Obviously, what I'm referring to and alluding to is adversity. And that's what we have to kind of see when the Vikings go through that adversity, how they get through it. Another team that hasn't really gone through adversity is the Steelers. So a lot of these 3-0 teams haven't gone through adversity, but you know who has gone through adversity? The Chiefs. And so that's what and you could also argue, well, Nick, the Vikings are going through adversity. Obviously, they've had so many injuries, and yes, that is true, and that is, but the system itself and how it operates and how Kevin O'Connell operates the system is not really seen at adversity, and everything's just seemed to click, and it kind of hasn't really mattered who's on the field. Obviously, having JJ out there is very important, but when he got hurt and he was out for a couple drives or whatever, a drive, I don't remember, he obviously, the offense was still rolling. So, and yes, 49ers were a little banged up, but it was still rolling. All right, moving on to our next game, we had the Saints and Eagles. This is where we did see the Saints O-line return back to what we're used to, and they did suffer a couple injuries as well as Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy. And, other notable injuries is such as Alvin Kamara, who did not practice yesterday, and such as Alontae Davis, who has been very, very huge on the sack game as a nickel, and also Demario Davis, who is one of their best defenders on the field. But thankfully for them, Tyrann Mathieu has been playing very well, and obviously he's outside of his prime. So for him to create turnovers as well as he has been huge for them, considering the offense started to actually kind of see itself through. And what I mean by that is the Eagles kind of picked up what they were trying to what the Saints were trying to accomplish, and they actually started to learn how to actually rush the passer, and which they completely struggled with. Their D line could not put pressures up in the first 2 weeks, and Vic Fangio actually changed it up completely, and I believe they're blitzing more. And Josh Sweat was getting in Derek Carr's face. Jalen Carter was mauling in the middle of the field, which they've completely needed, because I feel like teams could run up the middle on them a lot. And with Howie Roseman constantly drafting in the defensive line department, in the interior defensive line department, and none of them really panning out, this was good for Jalen Carter to have a game where we could see those flashes that we obviously knew from him coming out of college. So the Saints actually, kind of got exposed, and their weaknesses definitely got exposed, and the Eagles did a great job of doing that. And I think the Eagles could have probably showcased more. And this is kind of why I'm a little bit higher on them. The problem obviously is lying with the coach. Nick Sirianni is great. He's a great play caller. The problem is it doesn't feel like he can really truthfully run a team properly. Oh my gosh, the yawns are insane. There was 4 straight possessions where they were in the Saints territory, but they had no points to show for it. And it was just the egregious decision making from Nick Sirianni to continuously go for it on 4th down when they should just be taking the points. And there's a lot of other teams that are succeeding right now that are just taking the points, a la the Chiefs. It really is a bummer when you have a great kicker like Jake Elliott and you're not utilizing him because the analytics say that you should be going for it here. It's become such a modern thing to do, is just to go for it, because oh man, why not just go for it? Or why not just use it as if we have an extra down, and we have an extra down to get that extra 3 yards that we couldn't get in the first 3? Just take your points when you have them, because clearly they were in territory 4 times, and they were in scoring distance with a field goal, and he just refused to do it. You wouldn't believe it, but the actual secondary of the Eagles was looking very well. Darius Slay looking like his old self, and even the rookie Quinyon Mitchell was looking like a stud. And clearly they obviously needed that, because they were going up against a offense in which they were, a very home run hitting offense, and with Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave, to be able to shut those guys down after what they accomplished the first 2 weeks meant a lot. And obviously the pass rush getting there helped them out. So it was a team effort on defense. Everyone was kind of, firing on all phases. And so that was what kind of allowed them to shut down this Saints offense. The whole thing with Clint Kubiak is if he finds your weak point, he's going to he's going to expose it. And he wasn't really able to expose what their weak point was, and that was some of the linebacker play. and it always kind of has been their weak point. But what we saw the first 2 weeks from the Eagles, their defense was playing really just poor, and when the whole defense is playing poor, it feels like you can just kind of take advantage of any aspect of it. So Clint Kubiak kind of kept his same game plan, and the Eagles defense it worked. And it is funny how an older style Vic Fangio was able to actually shut down a lot of the older stuff that Clint Kubiak kind of sprinkles in his offense, and even the modern stuff. So even the spreads and everything that was working for them the first 2 weeks, in terms of modern, just wasn't working for the Saints, and the Eagles are actually able to pressure the quarterback, which they weren't able to do the first 2 weeks. Now on offense, the Eagles, they're dealing with a couple injuries, and Eagles fans, say what you want, about the Saints playing very physical. We'll get to see a little bit of what Jalen Hurts is without these two elite studs in Smith and Brown. I don't know if Brown's coming back for this game. I don't think he is. I think he might be doubtful. And clearly, Smith is out with a concussion. So, no panic on either side. No reason to panic for either side, But we did kind of get to see what the Saints really were when they faced a defense that was able to kind of shut them down. And but the problem again still lies in the fact that the Saints they are losing a lot of their pieces that make things go around there. Speaking of good defenses, two good defenses face each other in what some may have seen as a game not to watch, because it was very defensive centric, and that was the Steelers-Chargers game. I just have seen some poor play designs for the Steelers, particularly from Arthur Smith. I saw one when there was a pitch that they had outside on an outside zone, and it just there was no one blocking. So there was no one blocking on the outside. So why are we pitching to the outside when no one's blocking there? And then obviously there was a safety, a literal one of the top safeties in Derwin James, who is a box machine, and you just throw it to pitch it to his side with no blocker. What are we doing there? The thing with Arthur Smith in the first week is he kept Justin Field away from the middle of the field, typically because Jesse Bates is one of those guys where he's just so good at reading the QB that he can kind of hide what he's doing and kind of act like he's in this coverage, but he's actually going into another. And I know there's disguising and all, but the way he disguises his coverages is like no other. And typically, and obviously Arthur Smith, he was in Atlanta. He coached Jesse Bates. He knows what Jesse Bates is capable of just from that 1 year with him. And he clearly didn't want Justin Fields even touching the middle of the field. Whereas this time, he was able to do that. He was able to accomplish that, and there was even one whip route in which Fields hit Calvin Austin, and it was just right on the money. And obviously, something like that is where Jesse Bates is just going to come up and read that. But Fields obviously making strides, and it was a beautiful play call. So it's just going to be a matter of Arthur Smith understanding what defense he's really going up against, and continuously making consistent play calls. It's definitely been way better than it has been in the past for the Steelers. So that's an up. Even the commentators said this. Justin's just been elevating the team, whether it be through leadership or whether it be through actually just getting things done, like just operating in a way in which he's efficient and not trying to do too much. Because clearly in Chicago, he felt like he had to do too much because there was no system in which he could just operate and manage. And clearly we're seeing that with Caleb Williams too, as well as whereas Shane Waldron, and we'll get to that whole Waldron epidemic there. It's just Justin Fields now feels more comfortable, and it's not like it's the most craziest offense. Obviously, they're in terms of metrics, they're towards the bottom, but it looks more composed, and it looks more sustainable in a sense where because they haven't turned the ball over, right? So when you're not turning the ball over and you're playing good defense, that's going to be hard to stop. It's just a matter of we're going to force you to make mistakes. We're going to try not to make mistakes, and we're not going to go do anything too crazy. That's kind of how the Steelers play, and that's why they're 3-0. And it's kind of how the Chargers play as well. But they dealt with a lot of injuries. I'm not going to sit here and take away a win from the Steelers, but yes, the Chargers were dealing with a lot of injuries. But man, I mean, again, they're not asking much of Justin Herbert, but I feel like for the Chargers to win that game, they needed more out of Justin Herbert. Harbaugh just, he came with his own system, and obviously you don't want to ask too much of Herbert, with an injury, and he's gonna come to practice again with the high ankle, or with the not the high ankle sprain, but the ankle injury. He's gonna come to practice, and he's gonna be limited, and they're gonna continuously limit him. And I don't know, like, the talent that resides within him. I feel like you should utilize it in all of its capabilities. This goes back to, back when he started, he was very, very, very conservative in how he was handling the ball, and then the problem then became he was too aggressive, and then he couldn't find that happy medium. Wrong person. He's always just been conservative, and now it's like it's too conservative. It's way too conservative because you're keeping him away from what he's able to do. But again, that's just how Harbaugh works. He's just going to run the ball as much as possible. It was nice to see with the Steelers with Alex Highsmith. He was out. That Nick Herbig was able to step up for him, and thankfully for Steelers, they'll keep Highsmith in there because he's not going on IR, so he'll be out for just probably a week or two. I think in terms of the Chargers offense, again, Joe Alt did play very well against one of the top pass rushers in the league in TJ Watt. He only let up one sack in the whole game, and for the majority of the game he wasn't letting up any pressures. And not to say he wasn't going against TJ Watt on every snap. But, once TJ Watt found his stride, it was kind of, he took over the game, and he's just been taking over every game. But, now it kind of sucks because Joel has a knee injury. And I'm scared of the Herbert injury, the ankle injury, hurting this team similar to what happened with Burrow and Lawrence last season. With Burrow's calf, the first 4 weeks were very rough. I mean, I don't know what to make of the first 4 weeks anymore because it just feels like the Bengals struggle every first 4 weeks. So I don't know if to say, last year, was it the calf? Because it looked like his calf. He couldn't move outside the pocket much, and then once it kind of was healing, it looked like he was his own self. He was more comfortable. Or is it just they just suck in September, and when people are sitting here say, Joe Burrow needs to be blamed for this. Joe Burrow's been playing great. It's just a matter of the coaching, and getting them in the right mindset. Just starting out better. Like they just don't start out good anymore, and it is an indictment on what the coaching is doing. But yeah, so obviously now with the Chargers, both starting tackles are now injured. So again, they're dealing with a lot of injuries, and so it's going to be rough for them. But they once people come back and get healthy, I think they can make a push and probably make the playoffs. I think both those teams can make the playoffs, Steelers and Chargers. It just would be a matter of whether they'll be healthy down the stretch. The Colts and Bears. These are two young QBs who, to me, seem like they're just when they're just playing poor, they feel like they have to make a play. And that's not to say they try to make a play and then they can't. They do make the play, but it leads to some inconsistencies because then they get a little bit of a boost of confidence. Oh my gosh, I just made that play, and then they feel like they can do something again, and then they get picked, and then it's 3rd and 3 execution, and then they're not making the execution. To me, Richardson kind of showcases more of that than Caleb Williams in the sense that he, one play, will make an amazing home run play that Shane Steichen will dial up for him. And then on the simple stuff, he'll just make a small mistake. And we did see that during the preseason. I know I said at the start of this that not to take much from preseason, but we did see some of that from preseason, which did kind of scare me. And it is showing up now, and that's just some reads that he's missing. And obviously, he hasn't had the greatest amount of experience. He only played 13 games at Florida. He only played 4 games last year. So that's 4 games at professional level. 13, that's not as much. He's basically at the same level as Caleb Williams. He's basically a rookie. So for them to look kind of similar, and I know AR didn't have as much yards as Caleb, and seeing the thing with Caleb here is they need to work on his ability to stay comfortable. It just looks like he just feels like he's pressured, and it feels like he feels like he has to do too much. Like he should not be throwing 50 times a game. That just shouldn't be, not now. Maybe a couple of years down the road, but 50 times a game now, that's a Bears quarterback hasn't done that in 20 years. Like, what are we doing? That means they need to run the ball more. The run game has just not been there. And it's odd considering this was a run defense that was just letting up, like Josh Jacobs ran all over them. Joe Mixon ran all over them. And now I don't even think DeForest Buckner was in a majority of the game, and you're struggling to set up a run game, and that really is a knock on more so Shane Waldron than their running backs. And when you can get a run game, I think that it's so important for a younger quarterback to have a run game set up and something they can lean on until they get to throw. Throw. And I think that's what helped J.J. McCarthy out very well in Michigan. I just don't understand why some of these teams start to lean off the run game. The Colts definitely need to lean on the run game more. And when you have Jonathan Taylor back there, why not? Right? Give him more carries. AR, you don't even have to give Jonathan Taylor the ball all the time. You can do RPOs. And again, obviously Aaron needs to slide as much as possible. But RPOs, play actions, come on, we need more of that. That's Shane Steichen. I know you can dial that up because you're an excellent offensive coordinator or offensive play caller. Why are we not doing more of that? And you have the O-line to get away with a lot of that stuff too. Their O-line has literally played the best out of any O-line in the first 3 weeks. And they have the highest scoring offense in the AFC South. They just need to lean more on the run and not do too much of AR. Like what Anthony Richardson can be doing right now is what Malik Willis is doing. Now, obviously, I'm not comparing the two because obviously Anthony Richardson's a better athlete. He's just an overall better player, right? Why don't you do similar stuff where you can just open everything up? I mean, whenever they drafted Anthony Richardson, the whole hype was about like, oh my gosh, you have Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. Like that was just so awesome. But now it just feels like it's JT in the backfield, and it feels like AR is trying to make plays that he can't hit right now. In terms of the Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels situation talk, let me just put it this way. Jaden Daniels, we shouldn't sit here and say, oh, now he's in the better situation. Like yes, I agree. He's in a better situation because of who's coaching him. Matt Eberflus, a defensive coach, and Shane Waldron, who has dealt more with veterans and hasn't really simplified things for Caleb Williams at all yet. In which Cliff Kingsbury, who worked with Caleb Williams at USC the year prior, now is simplifying things for Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels can feel more comfortable and try and make those big-time throws, which he did against the Bengals on Monday night. Now, we can't sit here and say, we can't contradict ourselves and say, well, Caleb Williams had the better situation because he had all these pieces, but then come back and say, oh, he's in a worse situation because he's with the Bears, who have had just historically been a terrible organization and have just not had great coaching. You can't sit here and say one or the other. You have to say, I mean, like, obviously I think the Bears isn't perfect, obviously, but they have certain pieces that would work. On paper they can be a great team, but if you have some of the best players, it's not going to matter whenever my dog's choking up. It's not going to matter when the coaching's not there. Are you okay? Not the heck up. But the thing is like, you can't take away what Jaden Daniels has been able to accomplish, and sit here and say now he's in the better situation, even though everyone in the draft during the draft's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't start Jaden Daniels because the situation isn't all that too great. Okay. I mean, the coaching is there, and I really do believe it. Dan Quinn is that rah-rah guy you need. He has that culture. Yes, he's a defensive coach, similar to Eberflus, but at the end of the day, what he instills in his players, especially instills in his top guy, which is the quarterback, is important. I just find it so funny that the Bears decided to go with Waldron over so many other guys right now that are doing so well at the offensive court. Now, some of them aren't doing the best, but there is tons of guys, especially Cliff Kingsbury, who has third in points. Their offense is 6th in yards, 8 in yards of play, and this is the Commanders we're talking about, guys. This isn't no Bills team. This isn't this is the Commanders, who just offensively they've had 8 QBs for so long, and they've just not ever accomplished anything on offense. The problem was just that the Bears saw this Shanahan tree influence in Shane Waldron, and they just folded. They folded. Shane's close to last in points and yards, and they're last in yards in play in the entire league. Like, that's... And even with Caleb Williams getting 300-something yards last week, it speaks volumes that I just see the disconnect between Waldron and Williams, and I think I don't see a world where they have the exact same coaching staff next year, which is not what I saw coming to the season. Because I had high hopes for Waldron, I really did. What he did in Seattle was great. but it just didn't pan out. And seeing that might have just been a David Canales thing. Whoa. My dog is okay. Now I talked about the Texans Vikings being a shocker. This one is truly a stunner. How do the Panthers go and bench their quarterback? And then here comes this veteran who hasn't played in a while, who has a clipboard in his hand, a headset on, and he just comes and balls out just like no tragedy was was occurring. Like, the fact that Andy Dalton just came out there and slang it. And I know this is the Raiders defense. We can't say, but like the Raiders, it's not like the Raiders defense was playing all that bad this year. They were looking very confident against Chargers. And like what happened here? What happened here? I don't know. And coach, it seems to just be like with AP, he just seemed to express that not all the players were bought in. And the Panthers, they had no first half touchdowns in the last 4 games, and they had 2 this game. And Andy Dalton's passer rating was through the roof at around 120, and it's just crazy to think that in the last night's starts, Bryce Young had 2 touchdown passes, whereas Andy Dalton matched that in the first half of his play. Now, I'm not going to sit here and bash Bryce Young and sit here and say, oh, well, it wasn't working out. Everyone was blaming everything else other than Bryce Young, and then somebody comes in there and does his role for him, and now let's just sit here and blame him because that's a process of elimination. We can't do that. His development has been stunted, clearly, by this organization, and I think it's just clear at this point. And I think I would love for him to start again, but I think I would not want to see it in a Panthers uniform. And I know there's a possibility that he does start again this year, and obviously in a Panthers, because I don't think he's going to get traded this year. And I know Kenny Pickett was a late first round pick and kind of a reach in the first round. But don't be surprised if he does get traded in this offseason, because that's exactly what happened to Kenny Pickett after his second year. So I just would love to see Bryce Young in a different situation starting. It's just so necessary for this team for him to succeed. It just amazes me how Andy Dalton, I can't really explain it. Obviously he's a great guy, and he's been playing for a while, and he's had some great years, and he's even, it's a little bit of a chip on his shoulder game. He played against the Raiders, and he has 2 games coming up where he's playing against his former teams in the Bengals and the Cowboys. So, props to him for showing what he's still got in the tank. But I really don't understand what happened on the Raiders side of the ball either. So I couldn't tell you. And I don't think AP really could either. Here's a sound bite of what he had to say about their struggles.
No, they didn't. I think as the game went on, I don't think it was a team. I think there was definitely some individuals that made business decisions, and will make business decisions going forward as well.
Clearly, there has been a culture instilled in Las Vegas that a lot of the players have bought into. Like last year, in one of AP's first games, they were able to accrue 63 points. And that to me was less about how great of a team they were and more so about what AP brought to the table in the sense of culture, in the sense of, bringing guys together and having that camaraderie and understanding that we're a team trying to accomplish one thing, and that's win the damn game, and it just the whole energy, the whole vibe completely changed in the building as soon as AP started running things, and that it just seemed like a game like that was bound to happen, and you could tell in the locker rooms. I mean, the guys were smoking cigars in the locker room, like they were just the energy was just electric, and clearly, I think it is visible that culture is still there. It's just a few guys haven't really bought into it, and I know people probably take this literally, and maybe I'm wrong for not taking it literally, but I think more so what he means by the business decisions is guys are taking business decisions. They're just choosing to play. They're just choosing to not play as hard, and not match the rest of the team. I don't think it's more so like, oh, people are too worried about it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe because I mean other players have said that they thought that maybe like, oh, he's just talking about the player because like they're like back in their day they had similar things where players were like, I ain't gonna make that tower. I ain't gonna worry about doing that, or I ain't gonna like, because I know if I get injured, I'm not getting paid. But now it's becoming, well, if you don't gonna make that tackle, you're not gonna get playing time. So maybe he's being literal right there. But like a lot of times these coaches seem to have these statements in which it's not as blunt. Obviously, they don't want to reveal too much, but he could be really actually just straight up saying. I mean, and AP obviously comes off as a blunt guy, so it could just be straight up like they just shouldn't be making business decisions. And if they're gonna make business decisions, then I'll go make a business decision that's benching you or whatever. And it does kind of make you wonder who those players are, and you know that's the thing with those statements that they make. I don't know if it's like he's just saying that in general, like he saw it a lot, and but that's the thing too, is like he said it's not a team thing. Like he made that clear that it's not a team, like it's just a couple individuals. So that being said, it's probably specific people, and those people, if they don't, change their act, they're just gonna, no longer be in the equation. So I think these are two teams that are not going to accomplish anything this year. So I think that's kind of clear at this point. So time will tell if Devontae Adams stays there and if Gardner Minshew even stays the starting quarterback. But I would love to see AD go on a generational run here, especially against his old teams. That would be an amazing story. Going to a story-driven game. This was the game that felt like a must-win for both teams, which was the Cowboys and Ravens. And clearly the Cowboys showcased their ability to completely drop the ball when it comes to playing teams of high-level competency. And the Ravens came out very efficient to start out, and they just ran the ball in their faces. And this is due to the lack of defensive run game that this Cowboys team showcases. And this can come from the defensive alignments that were just seemed poor to me. I mean, I just saw a play today where they had the A gap was completely open. Like it was like all you had was a linebacker in the second level. That was it. And all the linemen were shifted to the right or the left in that A gap on an inside zone scheme that you could read from a mile away. That they were just gonna run up the middle, like in the I formation. Like come on, guys. Like what are we doing here? Like that's all you have to do. All you have to do is like, and I get it. They completely against the Saints last week, outside zone runs that was their poison last week. That was what they completely struggled against, if not the most thing that they struggled against. And for them to then just be like, okay, let's just, set the edge, keep the outside, and not worry about the middle, to me seems so poor, considering their defensive interior has been some of the poorest play I've seen out of any defensive interior in the whole league. And they've tried to assess that position, but I feel like they could have assessed it more in the draft. Didn't do that. Could have assessed it more in free agency. Didn't do that. They didn't even assess anything in free agency, and that's courtesy of Jerry Jones. So, and I sound like a Cowboys fan how much I'm ranting, but it's because the thing with the Cowboys is you see them in national media all the time. So it's so easy to kind of pinpoint their weaknesses because they're on the national stage at all times. So you just it's so easy to just ramble off because it's just all their weaknesses are just completely underscored by the media and by just on your television set. You can just see it because they're always in the 4:00 slot. They're always playing night games. They have a night game tonight, right? When you're seeing this video, they have a night game, a game in which they should win against the Giants. But when they're playing, they're not playing physical. Clearly, they're trying to play too much finesse, no physicality, and they're missing tackles in the open field. It's rough to watch. They struggled mightily against the RPOs. They were just like going for the cheese, man. It was like, what are you doing? Like, and who's a big proponent, or not proponent, but a big victim of that was Micah Parsons. And Micah Parsons just to put it out there verily, he just hasn't been that great. The pass rushing's kind of been obsolete, and DeMarcus Lawrence looks like the only defensive lineman actually trying to, work his butt off. And I know Marshawn Nealon's kind of looking bright. He's like top 4 in pressures, and that's good for a rookie. That's good to have a rookie that is showcasing. And there was some hope with Overshown and all these guys coming back, and then obviously I can't remember who it was, but a pass rusher did get injured to start the season, which did hurt. There's really no excuses at this point. I think Zimmer is not quite, he's not quite Dan Quinn, but I don't know what to say. I think it seems like the first game was kind of a cupcake game in terms of how their defense played. That offense in Cleveland has just been struggling the whole year. So to sit here and be like, oh, well, they did good the first week, like, oh, yeah, I don't know if you can even like use that game for true evaluation. And like, speaking of tomorrow's game, I think when it comes to the offensive side, their run game has just completely just been non-existent, and that they didn't spend any money on that. CD Lamb needs to completely eat tomorrow. I mean, the Giants, their whole, it's like a hospital with their DB room. It's just the whole injury report is DB, right? say DB 10 times fast. It just, to me, the culture just lacks in the building, and if they start losing, it's over. The game's over. Like, there's no heart. They don't fight with heart. I know they came back, but to me that was less of them really accomplishing anything. It was more of just the Ravens just to me throwing the game, and they get out of this rut. They weren't really getting out of a rut. The Ravens dug the Cowboys out of that rut. Losing McDonald to me was just the hugest turnover for the Ravens. I know the line turnover was terrible. This was the worst part of the turnover. And they can't stop the pass at all. At all. And that's why, with what they were doing at the very end there, within the last minutes, the Cowboys were just able to do what they are the best at, and that's, making throws off of play action and the shotgun. They just couldn't stop any of that, and when you can't stop the pass at all, during the most important part. They're just going to continuously go down the field on you and score. And then the Ravens just showcased why, it's important to have a great fourth quarter coaching, because this has been an issue for so many years, and whether it's a knock on Harbaugh or whether it's against their current DC, it needs to be fixed. And I think the Cowboys really did not show heart there. They just were almost giving the game back to them. And so that's kind of where we're at. And that's what's scary. Obviously Ravens have already scared everybody with how they've played the second game. A game they should have won. So I don't know what to think of the Ravens. I mean, after they almost it was looking great, 28-6, it was nice. And then they found a way to just give it back away. And I am impressed with how the Ravens O-line did play. I know I've been knocked on them. And Tyler Linderbaum, he is truly a star, a budding star. So, hey, these are two teams that are now 1-2 that I really don't know what to think of. And do I think they'll make the playoffs? Yes. But I don't think they'll make any noise in the playoffs. I know it's hard to say considering where the Ravens were last year, but based on that and what I watched, they just make too many mistakes. Rams 49ers, and speaking of making mistakes and letting the game back up, the 49ers, they're getting the injury room is insane. CMC, Debo, George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Dre Greenlaw, Elijah Mitchell, Ricky Pearsall, D. Winters. It goes on and on. Trent Williams was hurt for a little bit there, and then now he's sick. So it's a bug. There's a contamination of injuries in the 49ers facility, and it's kind of been there for years. And the only person that's not injured, other than obviously Brock Purdy, is not doing anything for him. And so now Brock Purdy has now been relying on a backup running back and a third string wide receiver. And those guys are great. I love those guys. They clearly are bought into the Kyle Shanahan system and are willing to do whatever they needs to win the game, and they will perform well. But when those are your two guys, it's hard to say you gotta but here's the thing. I can say the same thing about the Rams because they were also dealing with a lot of injuries. So this really showed us, the difference between a guy like Stafford and the difference between Purdy. And I know Purdy played well, right? There's no sitting here saying he didn't, but Stafford just, under so much adversity, was able to show his grit and his toughness and stick out and come back and win. Whereas I don't think Purdy's accomplishing that same feat with a similar circumstance. Yes, he had adversity, but there's still a lot of players. With the Rams, yes, they have some depth, but it's not as much as a next man up culture as it is in a team like Kansas City or the team, obviously, the 49ers. So for Stafford to do what he did really proves why he is that guy. And I just don't think you can take too much from that game because there was just so many injuries. And Juwan Jennings scoring 3 touchdowns in the game is an anomaly. So I think we can't take too much from that game and analyze it. Last two, the Monday night games. Trevor Lawrence just not playing how we would like to see him play, especially with that contract. Currently on a losing streak since Thanksgiving. So that obviously needs to change. Doug Peterson also seemingly on the hot seat. And we even heard reports today that Bill Belichick has connections with the Jags and he actually played a part in the Doug Marrone dismissal, and he even expedited that process while he was coaching. And there's a chance where he, Khan, picks him up, and that's he, because all the reports suggest he's coaching in 2025. So it's just gonna be a matter of what team, and it's gonna be a matter of what teams kind of dig themselves in a rut and stay in that. I also don't believe in the Jaguars defense at all. I think it's just not been what it was seeming to, develop into last year. I don't understand why it's been this bad, but it's going to be a matter of their pass rush getting back to what it was like last year to let the whole kind of defense breathe. They had some turnover, so I think they can make a step forward, but it is nowhere near what it used to be last year. On the other side, Bills have just been they've been firing on all cylinders. Josh has been spreading the ball out, and he's just getting everyone involved. And he even had something to say after the game about people not worrying about stats, people not worrying about this. And you could say that he was alluding to, obviously, his former coworker in Stephon Diggs. But I took it as something else. I really took it as, the NFL right now is very much a statistic-based league. And a lot of people are focused on stats, especially in the media. And when the media says, you passed for so-and-so amount of yards, and would you like to see yourself do this and that? And especially the reporters asking these types of questions. And so the players, whether they like it or not, are surrounded by stats. And, you got these next-gen stats, and it's like there's stats everywhere. And you have to look at stats to kind of understand where the direction your team's going. In certain sports, you can just get away with not looking at stats at all. But in football, it kind of seems almost necessary for you to look at stats because it tells you what's going on with your team and what you need to change. So players are unfortunately around stats a lot. So I took it as Josh Allen saying, like, these are, and it might be, a shot at Diggs because he's talking about, well, none of these players on this team are like, they don't care. They're just willing to do what they want for the team to win. And if that's scoring a touchdown, it's 2 touchdowns this game, but scoring nothing next game, that works for them as long as they're winning the game. That might be a shot at Diggs, and maybe it is. But I took it in a positive spin, and I think sometimes it's mostly important to do that and not assume things, unless they obviously say their name. So yes, it most likely probably is a shot at Diggs, and it makes sense based on the context that we have, and obviously we don't know everything about how those two operated together. But they wouldn't have got rid of Diggs if there wasn't, some type of issue brewing in the locker room. And obviously you can't, when you're going to pick and choose, you're going to pick Josh Allen every time over Diggs. And so, he's literally the face of their franchise, and there's no doubting that.
Very encouraging. And, I know there's a lot of people talking out there. Again, I'm not trying to tear down anybody. I've loved everybody that I've played with. And you don't have to tear other people down to build each other up. And, we're building each other up right now, and that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to stay together as a team, and we're really caring about each other. And, everybody in this building's got that feeling. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. Whether it's former players, and again, I love 14. I still do. But everyone wants to keep making this thing a thing, and we're so focused on what's going on inside of our building, and that's the only thing that we're caring about right now.
Last but not least, the Commanders versus Bengals. This is where we had a non-punting game, and it was truly electric to watch. Once that Bills game was starting to the two teams were starting to separate themselves from each other. Obviously, the main focus remained on this game. And man, did both offenses really kind of show out. Now, a lot of people are going to sit here and say, what do you mean show out? The Bengals, they've just looked horrible. I think Joe Burrow has actually played pretty well in these first couple weeks, and I don't think it's fair to say, oh well, they're 0-3. Clearly, their offense hasn't been. Yeah, like it's been a little bit slow to start in games, but when they get it going, man, it looks very similar to what they've been able to accomplish in the last couple of years. It's just obviously they haven't had everything together, and Andre Joseph is starting to look like an actual serviceable wide receiver 3 as a replacement for Boyd. So, I mean, they're clearly win now. They just have to put things together and just figure it out. I think this defense is holding them back, and obviously we kind of saw the worst two defenses in the league in this game. I mean, there wasn't a single punt, and there wasn't a single turnover forced. So, I mean, this is the first time that two teams have played an entire game without punting or forced a turnover since 1940. Like, that speaks volumes about, one, these defenses were playing so poorly, and two, it really speaks how well these offenses were able to play. And I don't think we can take that away from Bengals. But what we definitely won't take away is that Jayden Daniels is looking like the best rookie so far out of this draft. And it's what he's able to do with Cliff Kingsbury, simplifying it for him, and just being able to again, a lot of people in camp we're hyping him up very similar to Andrew Luck, and we hadn't seen a QB hyped up in years like this in pre-camp by the own building, and Cliff Kingsbury was gushing over him, like this is what he was able to do and what his abilities were. And it was just a matter of getting him comfortable, in which he definitely showcased on Monday night. And it was really fun to see him make the simple play and then make the big play, and then it was just execution on all levels. And it was one of the best games I've ever seen from a rookie quarterback ever. So I definitely was a fun game to watch. And what Bengals fans, I know I've said a lot of teams not to panic, but this is a very panickable offense here, going 0-3. Only 4 NFL teams have made the playoffs after going 0-3. And, I mean, the most recent one being the 2018 Deshaun Watson team. But I just think, I think the Bengals can accomplish that. I think they can be an outlier in that statistic. But it does scare me because they haven't been putting any of the pieces together. And now, in week 4, they have another game in which they definitely should win, right, in the Panthers. And I feel like if they don't win this, I feel like we can start assuming that this run may be over if they don't win this game. And what I mean by that is the Bengals we saw in 2021 and partially in 2022 is no longer the Bengals team we have in Cincinnati at this very moment if they go and lose to the Panthers. Now, like I said, it could be Panthers could win here just because it's freaking Andy Dalton, and a lot of these quarterbacks that just randomly get inserted and win away right away. I'm looking at you, Joe Flacco, just randomly just go on these huge runs. Because I mean, they're these veterans. First of all, they've already been through the gauntlets. They've already experienced almost damn near everything. Their ability to be comfortable is very, very feasible for them. And they just focus on having fun. And even Andy Dalton said in his presser, like, I just wanted the guys to have fun. That's all that mattered to him, really. And that's what he did. And he kept saying, like, when a day like this happens, you just be excited because it was fun. And so they're just having fun. They got a little chip on their shoulder, obviously, because, they're not a starter in the league anymore, and they're just kind of just sitting back, watching these young guys ball out. And for Andy Dalton, he was just able to work. I mean, we've seen games where he's just very struggled, and it's he's obviously in decline. But, man, we saw that with Joe Flacco, and dude went on a generational run last year. So you never know. You never know what can happen in the NFL on any given Sunday. But I think the anomaly of Andy Dalton needs to be shut down for the Bengals to kind of understand what team they are and build an identity, because I feel like if they lose this game, it's their season's over. I think you can definitely say that. That's all for the podcast today. I really appreciate you guys joining me. If you watch the whole thing, listen to the thing. It really means a lot. And hopefully this is actually helpful for y'all, and I'm not just spitting a bunch of nonsense to you, and it actually makes sense, and I'm not just rambling about things that you probably have already heard. So let me know in the comments if you have any concerns or you have any ideas for what I can do more. Just let me know. Thanks for watching or listening. And if you're listening, however you're enjoying this podcast, thank you for doing so. And I will see you next time.